Rabbi, Rabbi. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Where's Kevin?
He's gonna come on. He said 5 minutes.
Okay. What
He's
time
dialing in. Remember, he's gonna host from Baltimore.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Okay. It's okay if I take it here and then I'll drive to Shul for Shacharis?
What's the difference?
Because then I have to run now and get dressed, get ready really fast. I guess I can.
Yeah. You can do it now. Yeah, learn the first, of course.
Huh?
Yeah, we can learn first.
Okay.
You remember what we got up to?
Yeah. At the end of 10 somewhere. Yeah.
Where?
Hey, Kevin. What's going on? You guys hear me?
I moved on.
Yeah, Kevin, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay.
Colin's here too.
Am I upside down or you guys see me the right way?
You're perfect. Let's go. We're dying to learn.
Okay.
You're looking good, Rev Kevin. How was your trip?
It was eventful. Not eventful. It was what you expect driving 4 hours through the night with 3 kids in the car. Okay. All right. So we actually yesterday we got to the 2 dots. Me'ilos is where we're holding. So Colin, this will be a good chazara for our conversation yesterday. Okay. 2 dots. I don't know, whatever it is. You see where it is, Me'ilos, 2 dots?
Yeah.
Okay. So it said in the Mishnah, remember that there was a list of different types of halachos that it seemed on some level were not explicitly written in the Torah in a direct way. And it listed off a couple of them. It talked about Heter Nedarim. It talked about Chagiga. Talked about other things. And one of the things that was mentioned was Me'ilah. Just very quick hakdama to Me'ilah. We'll not learn the whole Masechta now. But Me'ilah is basically the halacha that a person is not allowed to have one of 2 things. One is not allowed to take something out of the Rishus of Hegdish. If it's Hegdish, it's got to stay in Hegdish's domain. Additionally, one is not allowed to benefit from Hegdish. Whether it's an animal of Hegdish or it's money of Hegdish, whatever it is, if Hegdish owns it, you can't take it out of Hegdish's Rishus and you can't benefit from it. If someone accidentally benefits from Hegdish, right? So then, number one, he has to pay Hegdish the value of the item he took, whatever the amount that he took. 2, he has to pay a 20% vig on top of that, like a called a chaimish, 20%. And then on top of that, he has to bring a special carbon me'ilah. A carbon me'ilah is an asham. An asham is a kache kachin. It's a real serious carbon. And he has to bring it because he benefited from Hegdish. Now, there is very little in the Torah in terms of the makar of the isser of me'ilah, which isn't really going to be discussed in our Gemara. There's different opinions in the Rishonim exactly where Me'ilah comes from, meaning in terms of the actual lo tzaseh of Me'ilah. The carbon is discussed at length in the Chumash, but the actual Isser is not. So the Gemara here says, how could that be, the din of Me'ilah, be the thing that we're referring to in the Mishnah, that it doesn't have any explicit reference? It's very explicitly discussed. The carbon is discussed a lot. Hold on 1 second. What's that, sweetie? Yeah, you hearing me? Okay, listen, it's good. Torah. Okay.
What's the pin to unlock? What pin do I use to unlock the screen?
Are you on the device?
I'm
You're
on
talking
both.
Okay, the other device is 195612.
195612. Okay, connecting to network.
Yeah.
Okay, can I do both the Zoom and my phone?
Yeah, but only if the internet's on there. Kalman, I don't know if he's gonna be able to get the Wi-Fi in if you're not there.
Okay, I can get the Wi-Fi. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
go right there.
I'm on my way to go. I have the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Okay.
go
So
right.
whatever. When you Kalman, when you get there, you'll quietly figure out. How to
No
do it.
problem. No problem.
Yeah. Rev Kevin, one more thing.
Eli. Yeah.
It's minor, but yeah. Remember we talked about what I'm a punishment guy. If the guy just stood up his nose and said, I don't want to give, I don't want to give the korban, I'm not going to do it. What is he chayav misa or chorus or?
No. If a person chooses not to do it, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the avera the punishment would be if a person chooses to not bring a korban that he's supposed to because he's really just being mevatel a mitzvah say. So I don't think there's malchus or anything like that. To my knowledge, not. I could be wrong. That I'm not 100% sure about. But it's not, to my knowledge, if we don't kill him if he doesn't bring a korban. Meaning, to begin with, he has a fee to bring the korban. He has a requirement to bring it. If he doesn't do it, okay, so it's not good. But I'm not exactly sure what the punishment is for someone who doesn't do it. Okay, so it says the Gemara. So Me'ilas in the Mishnah, that's very obvious. It's Mefurish in the Torah that talks about the korban a person needs to bring. Michtav Ksivan. It's written on all of Vayikra. It talks about it. Amar Rami Bar Chama, you're right. When we say in the Mishnah that Me'ilah falls into the same category as, let's say, Chagiga, that it's like a mountain that is hanging by a thread, again, which we're going to explain as meaning, serious halachos with many details that are predicated on very little explicit mention in the Torah. So it's not that we're just making it up. It's just that there's not a lot mentioned in the Torah about it. Contrast that with, let's say, the halachas of actually bringing a korban, which the entire Sefer Vayikra is about. This halacha doesn't have a lot written about it. The Gemara is saying, what do you mean? It has plenty written. So we're going to find a detail within Hilchos Me'ilah where maybe it's certainly not explicit in the Torah. And not only that, but it might be something that in Svara doesn't make a lot of sense. And therefore we'll have to conclude that on some level the rabbis had it in the Torah. And that's why the halacha is that way, even though it goes counter to what you would have thought based on how we see the psukim. Okay. So what is that case? What is the Mishnah? The Mishnah says as follows, and we're going to go through a series of cases here in Me'ilah to try to find and isolate the one case where that's the case. I'm going to make sure my internet is good. Can you guys all hear me?
I hear you beautiful.
I hear you also pretty good. A little choppy, not bad.
Okay, that might be on my end. I hope it's not. I mean, I have my Wi-Fi on. Let me just double check. Yeah, my Wi-Fi is on and I'm connected. Okay, hopefully it's good. All right, says the Gemara. What's the Mishnah say? Hashliach she'asa shlichuso. So we have to also talk a little bit about shlichus. The rabbi knows about shlichus. I'm sure some of you guys know about shlichus. Shlichus is the idea that in halacha, if I have something to do, let's say a mitzvah or an act that I want to do, I want to acquire something, there's a concept called shlichus, which means using a messenger. In halacha, that's a very serious thing, and it works, meaning I can ask someone to do something for me, and when they're acting on my behalf, it's literally like they're a vessel acting on my behalf. So anything they do, we say shlucho shel adam is kimoso, that the shliach, the agent of a person, is like him. The classic example would be if a person wants to marry a woman, he can give the money to the woman, to a friend, and say, "Hey, buddy, go visit Sarah and give her this money and tell her that I want to marry her. You go say that on my behalf." And when he does such a thing, the halacha is that the kedushin works. So if I hand the rabbi some money and the rabbi goes to find this woman to make kedushin for me, and he gives her the money, the rabbi is not married to her, I married to her. That's how shlichus typically works. Now, there's generally a rule that when shlichus works, shlichus only works for something that's not an avera. If something is an avera, if I say to someone here, I'm going to, take $10 and go to McDonald's and eat a burger or something like that, There's no way that the fact that you went and did something as an agent of mine, your eating in McDonald's doesn't come back to me. I can't give you money. That's shlichus. The idea that you're acting as if it's me only works if what you're doing is a mitzvah. But if it's an aveira, it doesn't work. The Gemara discusses in Kedushin and in other places exactly why that is. We won't get too far into that conversation now. But with that introduction, just again, shlichus is a concept in halacha that I can send someone to do something, and when he acts, it's as if I'm acting. But that's only true if it's not an aveira what he's doing. If what he's doing is an aveira, then that's on him to not do it. Okay. With that,
remember the scenario we looked at yesterday. So let's say he says,
well, no, Kalman, I understand for you it's a question. It'll be a disservice to everyone else if we jump there. Let's go through the Gemara. We'll clarify it as we go. Okay. And then if you have the question as we're going, it'll help. Because I think if we start having this conversation.
If he changed his mind about marrying the woman, he said, no, I don't want to do it. And now, he went ahead and said, hooray.
Yeah, shlichus won't work. If I change my mind in the middle, then again, because the understanding is that the entire duration of the act requires me wanting the shliach to continue going.
But is now he married to the woman, the shliach?
No, that's for a separate reason, though. And the reason over there is because marriage requires das, requires knowledge. So since it requires knowledge, when he's doing the kedushin, he's only thinking it on my behalf. Whereas if he's doing an aveira, let's say I send him as a shliach to go eat tevel or something like that. Well, eating tevel is also whether he has das or not. So therefore, it's not my, it doesn't come back to me. Ein shliach l'dvar aveira specifically is referring to an act of an aveira. Okay, so says the Gemara. A shliach she'asa shlichuso. Let's say I have money in my house. Let's say it's the pidyon of hegdish. Let's say I had an animal, the animal became a mum, and now I had to take the animal that was hegdish and I have to put it onto money. So this money really isn't my money. This is hegdish money. I can't use this money to go buy lunch. I have to use this money to go buy another carbon. But for whatever reason, I have it in my house and I set it aside. I foolishly don't write on the envelope that it's hegdish, and I accidentally mix it up with some of my other money, which is regular money. And now I go and ask the rabbi, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Gotta Get a Bagel and go pick me up, go pick me up a sesame bagel? So Hashliach Sh'asa Shlichuso, I gave him the money and inadvertently gave him hegdish money. And he went and he did his shlichus and picked up a sesame bagel for me. So when he went into the store and bought that sesame bagel for me, the halacha is, so he did asa shlichuso, then balabai small. Even though what he did was an aveira, it was me'ila. Why was it me'ila? Because he took most of hegdish and bought it, used it to buy something. He took it out of the rishus of hegdish and put it in his rishus to buy it. Then even though he's the one who did it, we say that I'm the one who gets the aveira and I have to now go pay the extra 20% and I'm the one who has to bring the carbon. However, lo asa shlichuso, let's say the rabbi, instead of getting a sesame bagel, picked up a cinnamon raisin bagel, which is not what I asked for. He didn't do his shlichus. So then the shlichus isn't real. He didn't do what he was supposed to. Therefore, shliach mal, what he did is on him. And therefore, he's the one who is looked at as benefiting from hegdish. And therefore, he's the one who's chayav to bring the milah. So again, what we're saying over here is that although normally we say, when there's shlichus, we say shlicha ein shliach l'dvar aveira. Here we're saying yesh shliach l'dvar aveira, and when this shliach takes the money and inadvertently buys something with money that's hegdish, the halacha is that he's the one who's considered the asham only if he doesn't do the shlichus. If he does do the shlichus, then it's on me. So you see, the shlichus it works. Ask the Gemara, how could this be? If he does exactly what I asked him and he's a shliach, why would I be the one?
I don't know if it's just me, but it looks like it froze.
Oh, I don't know what I was. Okay, I really hope this works out. Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
I can.
Can you hear me now?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was stuck in the bathroom. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. But can you guys hear me, or is it shvach?
We hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna continue. So again, what we're saying is that there's a din of shlichus, and normally we say ein shliach l'dvar aveira, but here it seems we're saying you can make a shliach for an aveira, right? Because what I'm basically doing is I'm inadvertently sending this guy, let's say in this case the rabbi, to go buy a bagel for me, a sesame bagel, and I give him money, and inadvertently that money happens to be hegdish.
Right.
So when he buys the bagel on my behalf, that bagel that he's buying is bought with Mo's hegdish. That's me'ila. So whose me'ila is it? So in that case, it's my me'ila. Why? Because he's my shliach, and we say shlucho shel adam kimoso. The shliach of a person is like him. We apply the normal rules of. Is it breaking up again?
No.
No.
Okay, so maybe I hear you guys talking. So normally I don't mind when you talk, but because of the video, when you're talking on my end, it sounds like I hear questions.
We
So
just think
maybe mute it.
okay. We just don't agree with him. Okay, very good.
Okay. So the Gemara is bothered. Ask the Gemara when the chiasa shlichusa, when the shliach gets the sesame bagel, amai ma'al. Why is the balabayas, the one who sends him, going to be chayiv for me'ilah? The chizeh chotev ezem is chayiv. Can the shliach be the one who does the aveira and the balabayas be the one who gets the punishment? That doesn't make any sense. We normally say ein shliach l'dvar aveira, like we said before, meaning this me'ilah seems to be a tremendous exception to the normal rules of shlichus. Gemara says, ein chanami, that's exactly the point. This is the halacha the Mishnah is referring to, where we say, Hainu kehararin hatluin b'sa'ara. This is the case where it's a mountain hanging by a thread, meaning this halacha clearly must have had some sort of tradition that the rabbis understood that this was always true from Har Sinai, even though we don't have it, beferish in the Kra, in the Pasuk, in the Torah Shebechsav. This is what the Mishnah is referring to. Amar Rava says, and we're going to see a couple of formulations here of potential ways to understand this kehararin hatluin b'sa'ara by Me'ilah. Rava says that doesn't make sense. Umay kusha. Dilma shani me'ilah. Maybe me'ilah is unique, and therefore it has a special halacha that when we say ein shliach l'dvar avera in other places, it won't be true by me'ilah, and by me'ilah we'll say yesh shliach l'dvar avera, that you can make a shliach for an avera, meaning if you send the shliach to do an avera, it's like you do the avera, and it'll be an exception. And why would we say such a thing? The Yalfa, we learn it out. Chet is Gzeir Shava Mitruma. In the parsha of Truma, we have a special halacha. Ma'ahasam shlucha shel adam kimosa. We have a special drasha. There's a very famous drasha throughout Shas of Chet, connecting Me'ilah and Truma. Maybe we'll use that same drasha to say that just like by Truma, where we say shlucha shel adam is kimoso, afkan, so too by Me'ilah shlucha shel adam kimoso, meaning to say even if it's for an avera, in which case then the halacha that we just referenced above is not a sort of tenuously learned halacha. It's a mefurish pasuk in Chet from the Gzeir Shava. But how could that be? The mountain's holding up by a thread. That's a mountain by a mountain. You have a Gzeir Shava teaching that halacha. So that can't be, Rava says, and therefore Rava concludes a different shot. What's the case of the Mishnah that is a big halacha that does not have a tremendous amount of support in the psukim that must be mimisora? That is the following brisa: Niskar bal habayis, but loy niskar shliach. What's it talking about over here? So you're talking about a similar case that we just mentioned before, but in this case, the balabayas who has the most, who has the hegdish money in his pocket and hands it to the shliach. When he hands it to him, he doesn't realize it's hegdish. Now the shliach leaves. The rabbi goes and gets my bagel. Before he goes and buys the bagel, I realize, oy vey, that money that I gave Rabbi V, that's Mo's hegdish, and therefore in my mind I cancel the shliach. Now I could do that because the shlichus is something that I have to have in mind to want to work the entire duration of the action. So if I send you to go marry a woman for me, like Kalman asked before, and I change my mind in the middle before you show up to give the kedushin to the woman, me changing my mind makes the kedushin not chal. It doesn't work. Because my mind has to be wanting the act you're doing for me the entire time. So what happens if in the middle of this shlichus, I say, you know what, I don't want the bagel because I don't want my money of hegdish to go buy it. I don't want to be the one who's chayiv for the me'ilah. So I change my mind. Now Rabbi B doesn't know that. This is before the days of text messages. So he goes and buys it. What is he effectively doing? He's the one who's taking the money of hegdish and buying the bagel. So he's the one who's mal. So says the brisa, niskar balabayas. If the balabayas remembers that the hegdish is hegdish, but loy niskar shliach, but the shliach isn't aware, shliach mal, the shliach is chayiv for me'ilah and not the balabayas. Ask the Gemara, ask Rava, shliach anya, this poor shliach, my kavod, what did he do to deserve being the one in this case that he should be the one bringing the me'ilah? Meaning, what's the difference between the case when I remember as the balabayas versus when I don't? The shliach has done nothing different. And yet in one case, by me not remembering, I'm chayiv for me'ilah, but when I remember, meaning to say I changed the shlichus, now all of a sudden he's the one who's going to be chayiv for the me'ilah. Poor shliach, what did he do wrong? Elamai zakrava, the fact that you can't really find a distinction between both cases, and yet in one case the shliach is a chayiv me'ilah, and the other one he's not. That subtle distinction is hainu keharin hatlin bisara, is what the Mishnah is referring to. That we don't have that explicitly mentioned in the Torah. Rav Ashi is bothered by this. 1 second. My kusha, what kind of idea are you saying, Rava? Dilma mididahavi amoitzi mos hegdish l'chulin. Is this not the regular normal case of Meila? What is Meila? Meila is a person who utilizes or benefits from the money of hegdish in an accidental way. Meaning, if you're doing it b'mezid, that's not Meila. What we specifically mean to when you're bringing the carbon Meila is when you do it the shogeg, meaning you're missing something in your knowledge about the case. So isn't this the same thing? The shliach didn't know that the balabayas canceled the shlichus. Okay, Nebuch, it would have been nice if he would have found out, but he didn't find out. He's a shogeg. Is this not exactly the case that's covered in the Torah when it talks about Meila? Therefore, Rav Ashi does not like this version of Rava. And I'll just give you a heads up on the foreshadowing. We are eventually going to come back to Rava, and Rava is going to be the answer. But for now, let's go off on a slight tangent. Rav Ashi has his version of what the mountain hanging by a thread is. Rav Ashi, what are we talking about? The new Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Notol even oy koira shel hegdish. Let's say I'm a guy and I walk into the property of hegdish and I see they have some lumber or some bricks. I take a 2x4 and I want to take that 2x4. It says over here, if I take it, harei zeh loy ma'al. I have not been over on Me'ila, which is a strange thing because normally the rule is, like I said earlier, Me'ila is either I take it out of Rishus of hegdish or I benefit from it, right? So here I'm taking this piece of lumber and I take it out of Rishus of hegdish. I'm not chayiv for Me'ila. However, not lechaveira, if I give it to my friend, hu ma'al. Now I'm chayiv for Me'ila, the chaveira lema'al, but my friend is not. Now I don't understand this. The Gemara michti. Mishkal shakla. I took it. I took it in the first case and I took it in the second case. Mali hu mali chaveira. Why is it that when I took it the first time, right, I'm not chayiv for Me'ila, but when I took it the second time and gave it to my friend, now there is a chayiv for Me'ila, right? What's the difference? Meaning, really, there shouldn't be a difference. The Gemara says, Dr. Vashi, exactly. That's the case. That distinction must be something we have in Messiah. Therefore, Kahara and Hatluim Messiah, that's the case of the Mishnah. The Gemara says, 1 second, Ravashi, that also doesn't make sense. My kusha, Dilma the Shmuel. Maybe we'll explain that Mishnah the way Shmuel explained the Mishnah. And however Shmuel explained it, it'll become logical. It'll become something that fits within the normal paradigm that we have for the halachos of Me'ila. And it won't be something that we need to say it came from the Sorah. It's something that we would have been able to extrapolate on our own. What's the case? He says, Shmuel, Damar Shmuel, Hachaba Gizbar HaMesuras Lo Avnei Binyan Askinan. We're talking about not that the first guy in the first case who took it was like a regular Joe like me, but rather it was the treasurer of Hegdish. The treasurer of Hegdish has a certain leeway in terms of utilizing Hegdish. He's got to move stuff around, he picks stuff up, puts it down, sometimes he has it in his pockets. So he's almost like an extension of the domain of Hegdish. So therefore, if he picks up a 2x4 or he picks up a brick, that's not really called leaving the Rishus of Hegdish. The whole Heicha de Mancha Rishusa Didei Mancha, everywhere it goes, it's still like it's in Hegdish's Rishus. That's why maybe the first guy who picks it up is not going to be Chai for Me'ila. But the moment he hands it over to the second guy, that second guy is not part of the treasury of Hegdish. That guy is just a regular guy. So the moment that happens, it's leaving the Rishus of Hegdish and it's going into another person's Rishus. That's Me'ila. So the Gizmar is going to be Chayav for that Me'ila, and it makes perfect sense. Now that it's that shot, that's the shot in the Mishnah. That can't be what we mean in our Mishnah, that's a mountain hanging by a thread, because that's the Beferish halacha. That's the basic halacha in Me'ila, that the moment you take it out of the Rishus of Hegdish, it's going to be Chayav for Me'ila. Elami Seifa, the Gemara says, we'll find that same Mishnah in the Seifa, maybe over there we'll find the halacha. What does it say? It says, Bana b'seich beisa. What if I took the 2x4 and I built it into the house? Now, general, very quick, we'll get to Perek Meruba, the 7th Perek of Baba Kama, hopefully soon. And we'll learn over there, there's a halacha called shinui. If I steal something from you, and I then go make a change in the item, so much so that it can no longer be referred to as what it once was. Let's say I steal some lumber from you, and I take it and I build a house. So now the wood is in my house. So I've been kaina, I've acquired your wood with the shinui. Shinui is kaina. Now I have to pay you back for what I stole, obviously, but I can't just take it back and give you back the piece of wood. It's no longer in the same form it was when I took it. So therefore, I've been coined. It's mine. That's generally the rule. So that's what it's saying over here. What it's saying is, it says in the Sefer of that Mishnah that if I took the 2x4 and I built it into my house, now this 2x4 belongs to Hegdish, right? Harei zeh loy ma'al. I haven't been over on Me'ila, which is strange. Why not? It says only ad sheyider tachteha b'shaveh pruta. Only if I live under it and I benefit from it, at least the value of a shaveh pruta. Because again, remember what I said before is there are two requirements two potential isurim in Me'ila. Isur number one is removing Me'ila, removing an item of Hegdish from Hegdish's domain into my domain. Separately, even if it's still within the domain of Hegdish, let's say I go and I benefit, I try to benefit from it, that's also Me'ila. So what we're saying over here is even though I took the 2x4 and I stuck it in my house and I built it into my house and I was kind of it with Shinoi, I'm not chayav for Me'ila. But once I go under the part of my house where I used that 2x4, now I've benefited from the 2x4, now I'm chayav for Me'ila. Michti asked the Gemara, Shnuye Shniya, in both cases, I made a shinoi. I made some sort of a change in the 2x4. I cut it up. I nailed. I attached it. Whatever it is. Mali dar umali loy dar. Once I'm kone with shinoi, it went out of the domain of hegdish and it went into my domain. Should I not be chayav for meila? Elamai. It must be that the subtle distinction between these two cases is exactly what we're referring to in our Mishnah. Hainu keharin hatluim b'sa'ara. Maybe that's exactly the case. The Gemara says last time. We're going to come back now. Well, my kusha. No, that can't be. Maybe that seifa of the Mishnah is also an ukimta of Rav. Now, what did Rav say? Damer Rav. Maybe it's talking about you have a window where the wood isn't there's no shino, you're not doing anything to be kaineh, you're just placing it up in such a way where it's keeping the window open or closed, whatever it is. You're using it in such a way where you're never really ever kaineh. Really, it's still in the rishus of Hegdish. And remember, the Gizbar, he has the leeway to be able to move items of Hegdish around and it's still considered in the domain of Hegdish. And it's only once he benefits from the wood by maybe standing under the window and getting the light from it or however he benefits in the house itself, that's the moment he's chayiv in for Me'ila. And therefore, idar be'in, iloi dar be'loi. But if so, therefore, only once he benefits from it is he going to be chayiv Me'ila. Once he doesn't, he's not going to be chayiv. In which case, then, this is a regular, normal, vanilla case of Me'ila. This isn't a special halacha that I wouldn't say is explicit. This is explicit. So therefore, we're left with no example of what does it mean in the Mishnah that Me'ila is like a mountain hanging by a thread. All of the halachas we've discussed have a very strong source in Psukim. Let's go back to the case of Rava. What was the case of Rava? Rava's was the case where the Balabayas sends the Shliach, but the Balabayas cancels the Shlichus in the middle. Right? You asked the question, and Rav Ashi asked, is that not a normal case of Me'ila where it's a shogeg? The Shliach, unfortunately, doesn't know that the Shliach was canceled, Shlichus was canceled. It's unfortunate, but that's exactly the normal case. He's lacking some information. He did an Avera B'shogeg. The Gemara says, that question, not a question. Why? Because there's a slight difference. When we talk about shogeg, accident, it really lives on a spectrum. On one side, you have an onus, where a person's completely held on. Can someone press mute on the device? One of the devices there is creating a feedback. Okay. Just hit mute. And now I lost you. I can't see you guys. Okay. I'm going to continue going. Can you guys hear me? I can't see if I can't see you.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Well, yes, I hear you now, but maybe press mute though, if you don't mind. Just mute, not the video.
Okay, 1 second. Try to find the mute button. There's a mute button. Should be somewhere here.
Tap the screen, and it'll be where the microphone is. Tap the screen. Awesome. Okay. So continues the Gemara. So I just want to explain. So when we talk about shogeg lives on a spectrum. On one end, you have ones. Ones is when a person literally had completely outside of his control. A hurricane happened, the streets got broken, the bridge fell down, he couldn't make it then. Whereas all the way on the other side, you have posheya, a person who's negligent. So if a person's negligent, then he's always chai. If a person is an onus, he's always pater. A shogeg is right in the middle. It's an accident, meaning on the one hand, you're missing some information, and maybe you could say it's closer to an onus. On the other hand, sometimes a shogeg is you're doing an act that's irresponsible, and you didn't realize the circumstances, so maybe we can hold you accountable. So you can have, there's no black and white. You have a question?
I have to run to the restroom quickly. Just if you don't see me, just 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna continue though, if it's okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I did this stuff yesterday, so I thought it was yesterday.
Okay,
so
well,
I'm good.
Very good. So therefore, there's the spectrum. So what the Gemara means to say is like this: the case of Rava, where the shliach doesn't know what's going on, that he doesn't realize the Balabayas has canceled the shlichus, right? What is that exactly? Which is that closer to? With the kakashalach mid dahavi amoitzi mos hagdish lakulin, He says like this: Hasam Meida Yada the Ikazuz the Hegdish. The normal case of Meila, where a person did benefit from the money that he has in his rishus that belongs to Hegdish, it's his responsibility to take a look and check to make sure the money that he's about to send, it's his responsibility to make sure that that money is not Hegdish. And therefore, if he didn't, and he ended up inadvertently utilizing money of Hegdish, he's chayiv to bring a carbon me'ilah. Because on some level, even though he's not mamish a pesheya, he's a slight pesheya. This Chagiga is a slight pesheya, right? Mashein kain hacha miyada, this shliach, that the Baal Abai is completely without him knowing, why should the shliach assume that the shliach is going to be canceled? That's much closer to like an einus. And really, it shouldn't be his me'ilah. Therefore, Hainu Kaharan Atlin Besara, the fact that he's still Chayav Me'ilah, even in this case where it's really almost like Mamish and Einus, that's exactly what is referenced in the Mishnah. And that is in Maskana exactly the case. Continues the Gemara. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah then said, after it listed all of the cases of Hataras Nadarim and Me'ilah and Chagiga, it then said that what does it mean? It's Mikra Muat for Halachos Merubos, that there were those halachos didn't have a lot in the Torah, but there are a lot of halachas that come off of it. Now the Gemara brings a small brisa that's referencing a similar halacha or a similar idea. The brisa said, Negoyim, the halacha of Tumah V'Tara when it comes to Negoyim, right? When we're talking about Mitzayra, the oholos and the Tumah that a person can have if a person's inside some sort of an ohel where a mace is inside the ohel and the Tumah can go all over it, whatever's inside of it. Those halachas is Mikra Mu'at, the halachas Merubas. There's very few psukim, and they have many halachas similar to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Negoyim, Mikra Mu'at, that's the Gemara. What are you talking about? Negoyim is tons and tons and tons of psukim. Negoyim, Mikra Merubahu. You can go, you do Shnai Mikra Achatargim, you'll see how much it is. It's crazy. Amar Papa Hachikama, you're right. What do I mean when I say, what does it mean in the Brisa? Negoyim is Mikra Meruba, the halachas muachis. Negoyim has many psukim and very few halachas, meaning in the end of the day, after everything's said and done, pretty straightforward halachas. Whereas a halachis is mikra muat, is not allowed in the Torah in terms of psukim. However, if it's the halachas merubas, is one of the longest mesechtas in Shas in terms of mishnayos and in terms of prakim is mesechta oilas. So it says the Gemara, okay, thank you very much. My nafkamina. What's a nafkamina here? It's Torah yesh, and I have to learn it. What's the difference if it's a lot in the psukim, it's not a lot in the psukim? I got to learn it all. He says, you're right. What's my nafkamina? If you're unsure a sugya in the goyim, open up a chumash. If you have a suffix or you have a shaila in alos, open up a mishnayos. Obviously, don't mean paskin shailas from psukim or even paskin shailas from mishnayos. It just means if you want to know where the reviewing of the halachas should be, you should start with negoyim in the psukim, and with alos you can run to the mishnah. Okay, back to the mishnah. What did our mishnah said? It then went into a third category. Remember, category number one was Hataras Nadarim, where it's like Korchin Va'avir, it has no source whatsoever. Then there were three things that doesn't have anything to be Soymech on. Those are like mountains hanging by a thread. And then the third case was things that are not necessarily explicit, but they have what to be Soymech on. Like if someone asked me what's the halacha, you would say, hey, you have what to be Soymech on. That doesn't mean that it's mamish 100% for sure. It just means if you need to, you can do it. The same thing over here. We're saying the following halachas all have what to rely on. The implication is that they're still not completely explicit. Now, what's dinin? Said in the Mishnah, dinin, like financial halachas. Says the Gemara, michta ksivan. What do you mean? The entire Sedra of Mishpatim is filled with dinim, and they're very much beferish. Gemara says you're right. We're talking about a case of what Rabbi was talking. What's Rabbi talking about? The Tanya Rabbi Yomer. Nefesh tachas nefesh. Now this nefesh tachas nefesh is talking about a case where two people were fighting. I wanted to kill him, he wanted to kill me, and accidentally a woman was walking by and we killed the woman. Now what's the halacha? The halacha is that no one's chayiv misa here. The halacha is that you got to pay money to her yorshim, her descendants. They benefit by you having to pay the value of her life. We take basically how much would that woman have been able to be sold in the market had she been like a shivcha. And you would pay money, similar to the idea of ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein. We don't mean actually take my ayat. It means money. So to over here, nefesh tachas nefesh here doesn't mean actual nefesh. It means the main nefesh. Ay ata oimer mama noeno ela nefesh. Maybe no. Maybe it is taka. You die. Maybe this is a case of murder. Where it says no. Nemra nesina lamata, but nemra nesina lamala. What's it referring to? There's another case where two men are fighting and they accidentally, inadvertently punch a woman and they make her lose her baby. So the vladais, what's the halacha? Over there, the halacha is malahol and mammon, afkan mammon. So too over here, it's mammon. Meaning the point is, and there's a machlekes actually. This sheet of Rebbe is not a divrei hakoil. Rebbe holds that if two people are fighting and each one is having kavana to kill the other one, so he has intent to murder, he has murderous intent, and he end up murdering. But the difference is, in this case, he didn't murder the person who he intended on murdering. He murdered someone else. It's like if I shoot a gun at someone, chas v'shalom, and my intent is to murder them, and someone steps in front and dies, Rebbe would say, I'm only chayav to pay money to his family. Whereas the Tanakama, the Chachamim who argue on Rebbe will say, no, I can connect the intent to murder, even though it was connecting to murder Ruvain. If I ended up murdering Shimon, intent to murder and ending up murdering, that's called murder, and Yechayev Misa. Says the Gemara Weiler. But meaning, and what's the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying that's the case of the Mishnah that isn't explicit. It's only through some sort of a drasha. Now here, the drasha is much more explicit than the drashas we've been talking until now, because here the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah says that you have what to be samech on. So this isn't like something the Messiah that's hinted at in the halacha Moshe Sinai type of thing. These are going to be more explicit, but the idea is they're not mamish beferish in the Torah. Avoidus, karbanos, says the Gemara. Karbanos, the entire Sefer Vayikra is explicit. Michtan Ksiva says the Gemara. So Gemara says you're right. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about halachas dam. Very quickly, we'll get to Masech Zvachim Menachas Mitzvah. But in Zvachim, at the beginning of Zvachim, goes through all of the different sugis and halachas of who's possible to bring a carbon and kosher to bring a carbon, and what are the circumstances one needs to bring a carbon in order for it not to be possible. What machshava a person has to have when he's bringing a carbon. It's got to be lishma. It's got to be l'shem bailam. Depending on what type of carbon it is, you can really ruin a carbon with the wrong machshava. And then most importantly, there's a halacha. If a person, while he's doing a carbon, he's doing any of the avodas of a carbon, if he thinks that he's going to eat the carbon outside of the right time or outside of the right place, it becomes possible, potentially pigul, right? Very serious halachas that matter. Now, when do those machshavos, when do those requirements apply? Do they apply when you're putting the animal up on the mizbeach? Does it apply when you're bringing the animal inside the azara? No. It only applies during the 4 avodas. There are 4 avodas of every carbon. What are the 4 avodas? There's the shchita. There's the kabbalas hadam, which is collecting the blood from the throat into a kli shares. Then there's the holacha, taking the kli shares, walking it over to the mizbeach. And then there's the zrika, the spritzing of the dam onto the mizbeach. And each one of those things is a part of the avodah. And if during any one of those 4 portions of the avodah, a person has some sort of a wrong machshava, or he himself is a tameh or an ora, whatever it is, someone that would make him puzzle to be doing the avodah, the halacha is the carbon would then be affected by that. Now, just parenthetically, just know that shchita is different than the other 3. Shchita, we learn in Psukim, it doesn't mention kayan by shchita. Shchita could even be kosher by Yisrael, but the next 3 avodas, the collecting the blood, walking the blood, spritzing the blood, that's all got to be done by a kayan and has all these requirements. They all have the requirements. The only distinction is shchita is it can be done by Yisrael. But either way, halacha. Now, if you look in the psukim, you'll see it doesn't say here. I'll read the pasuk outside. Pasuk says like this: the shachat as ben habakar lifnei Hashem. You shall shecht it in front of Hashem. The hikrivu b'nei Aharon hakohanim es hadam. They bring close the blood. The zarku es hadam, and they spritz the dam ala mizbeach stavib. So it mentions 3 things, and we understand it to mean 4. First, the shchita, then there's the bringing it close, and then there's the spritzing it. So what is this vihikrivu? We call it bringing a sacrifice, a carbon. But where does the language vihikrivu? What does it mean? So says the Gemara, the Tanya, the Brisa says vihikrivu zu kabbalas hadam. Hikrivu is understood to be the accepting of the dam into a kli shares from the throat of the animal after you sheft it. Now, why did it use the language of vihikrivu? Hikrivu normally actually means holacha, as we'll see in a second. It used vihikrivu. Why didn't it just say bimekabel? Why not just say accept the blood into a kli shares? Why use a language of bring it close? Bringing something close means you're transporting it. Why use that language? Now, how do I know that language means to transport it? The pasuk says in a separate area by the oila, the hikriv hakoyin es hakoil, the hikter hamizbecha, and over there, v'amramar zu holacha seivorim lakevesh, referring to taking the body parts and bringing it over to the ramp of the mizbeach. So therefore, you see the hikriv means to travel with it, to transport it. And if that's the case, why did we use the lashon of hikrivu to refer to the accepting of the dam when we're referring to that? Why not use a more specific lashon of Kabbalah? The Gemara, remember, this is to teach us that we're putting holacha and Kabbalah in the same category. Remember, the holacha loitafka michlal Kabbalah, that really both of them are considered avodas, and really we don't have 3 avodas, we have 4 avodas. The chiddush of the Gemara is that don't think that holacha is any less of an avodah than the other one. Now I might ask you, why would I think holacha is any less than the other one? Meaning, so the Gemara says very simple. If you learn the Mishnah in Zvachim, you'll see. The Mishnah says in Zvachim, there's no way to have a carbon without a shechita. There's no way to have a carbon without the acceptance of the blood into a klisharis, and there's no way to have a carbon without spritzing it on the walls of the mizbeach. But it is possible to have no halacha. What if I chef the animal right next to the mizbeach, I put it into a kli, and I'm standing right there, and then I spritz it. I don't have to take a step. So since it's a type of avodah that's not absolutely required, you might think that maybe it's not on the same level as the other 3. Kamash Malone over here, we're saying it is. In fact, what you'll learn when you learn the Mishnah in Zvachim, you'll see, and the Mishnah in Zvachim, it teaches us that the psul of machshava only applies while you're doing the holacha that's required. What if a person does the shechita next to the mizbeach, accepts the blood next to the mizbeach, just starts to take a spatzir, walks around a little bit, and then he comes and puts the spritz on the mizbeach, and while he's doing that little spatzir, he has all of the terrible machshavas. Doesn't matter, it's kosher. It's only when the halacha is a halacha l'tzorech, it's needed, that it's considered an avodah. If he's just walking around because he's got to stretch his legs in the middle of the carbon, that won't pass it. But the point in our Gemara is this is the halacha that's not mamish beferish. It's sort of hinted at through v'hi krivu. Therefore, that's what it means when it says that it's only al mashi yismach. It says the Gemara Weiler taharas. It says in the Mishnah that one of the things that is not explicit but has what to rely on are taharas. Taharas meaning keeping things tahar. Even says the Gemara, that's also beferish throughout the Torah. What it refers to is the requirement when we need to go to the mikvah, whether you're talking about kalim that are going in the mikvah, or perhaps even people going into the mikvah. What we mean to say is referring to mikvah. The leksivit, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah exactly what the shiur for a mikvah is. The Tanya, it says in the pasuk, it says psar b'mayim, you wash up your body in water. B'mei mikvah, we understand that to mean referring to the waters of a mikvah when it says b'mayim. As kol b'sarai, what does that mean? Is mayim shechol gufay oilo behen, an amount of water that your entire body is going to be able to fit inside. The kama hein, and how much is that? Ama al ama b'rum sholosh amas. Now this isn't explicit in the Torah. This is the rabbis sort of understanding what it means, and they understand it to mean an ama by 3 amas. Which, if you think about it, let's say an ama is 2 feet, so that's 2 feet by 2 feet square, and it's 6 feet tall, which makes sense. That's roughly how much an average sized man will be, maybe a little less. If you hold like the other Rishitas, it'll be like a 5'6" man, whatever it is. But the point is, this is what it's referring to in the Mishnah that's not explicit in the Torah, the shiur from Mikvah. Says the Gemara Vayit Tmeis. Says in the Mishnah that another thing that's going to be yesh al mashi yismechu is Tmeis. And Michtan Steven says the Gemara that's also explicit in the Torah. Where it says you're right, but there are some things that are not mamish explicit. Now, just very quickly, there's a parish of Shmona Shratzim. There's 8 types of shratzim, 8 types of creepy crawlers that the person becomes tummy by touching if they're dead. So those 8 things, what's the shear? How small can it be? How much of the animal? How much of the sheretz do I have to touch? What if it's only a leg, right? So says the Brisa, the Tanya, Bohem, the pasuk by Shratzim talks about, it says Bohem, in them. So I might think Yochel Bekulon, that they need to be entirely shalom, that the sheretz has to have all of its body parts, not missing anything. Talmud Loimar, Mayhem. Mayhem is mashma, even a portion of the animal. Yochel B'miktas. And I might think even a tiny kol shehu, nothing, that's enough. Even a little fingernail of an animal, of the sheretz is going to be enough to make me tameh. Talmud Loimar, no Bohem. We go back to Bohem to tell me that it means it's got to be in between, meaning it can't be a mashahu, but it doesn't have to be the whole animal. Okay, so how much is enough and how much is not enough? Okay, so I find an amount that is a portion that's enough to say that it's like the whole thing. That's like a mikvah. We don't know how much that is. They said that's the same size as like a lentil. One of the 8 shratzim is called a chaymet. Its starting size is that big. And therefore, that's the size that they say. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer, he explains, what is that? How big is this thing? It's kizan of halta. It's like the tail of like a lizard or a chameleon or something like that, which is just referencing the size. But the point is, again, that would be something that's not explicit. That would be something that we would have to have the remiza. And therefore, That's what the Mishnah is referring to. Arayas, it says in the Mishnah, Arayas is something that's not explicit. Right? The Gemara, what are you talking about? Michtav Ksivan, it's the parish in the Torah. Loi Nitzracha, what are we talking about? Lebitoi me'anu sasei. So without getting too far into the details, bitoi is mefurish in the Torah, but only when it's bitoi me'ishtoi or bitoi of ishtoi. But bitoi me'anu sasei, if a person has bia against the woman's will and has a child from that, the child is his daughter, but not our standard daughter, and therefore the like siva, that's not the farish in the Torah. How do I know bitoi me'anu sasei? Amar Rava, Amar Li Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Asya hina, Asya zima zima, famous Gereshava. It's a two-step Gereshava of Heina, which is one. I don't want to it's going to take a little too long to explain the drasha. One's talking about actual bitoi, and the other pasuk is talking about a different area talks about the einish. Whatever it is, the point is that the Gereshava there, it's a two-step Gereshava to tell me that bitoi and asasai. Since the two-step Gereshava, that's already not explicit. That's considered something that's yeshmi al mista amashi yismachu, and therefore that's what it's referred to in the Mishnah. Hein gufei Torah. It said at the very end of the Mishnah that Arayas and maybe some of those last halachas are hein gufei Torah. That these are the gufa Torah. This is like the body of the Torah, seemingly implying that all of the other areas of halacha don't fall into that category. Right? The Gemara, hani in hanachlai. That doesn't make any sense. Elaima hein vehein gufei Torah. We'll have to change the girsa or perhaps read it differently to include everything. And the point basically is everything is gufei Torah. And the point of the Mishnah is to say that even though these things are learned out in a non-explicit, somewhat, derech remiza fashion, they're all considered gufei Torah, and they all have the same status. Hadron Allah hakol chayavin. Says the Mishnah Weiler. Ein darshan be'arayas b'shlosha. This Mishnah really is a continuation of the Mishnah before. We were just discussing arayas. Says this Mishnah that one is not supposed to publicly teach about arayas, and arayas here does not mean sexual conversations. It means the halachos of arayas. The halachos of arayas shall not be taught, and we're going to read the Mishnah in the Havamina of the Gemara. The Havamina of the Gemara is that what it means here is ein darshan b'arayas b'shlosha means 2-3 people. You cannot teach it to 3 people. Let me say that again. You cannot teach it with 3 people, meaning you and 2 other people. Ein darshan b'arayas b'shlosha, meaning a group of 3. The rabbi and 2 other people can't learn arayas. The loy b'masa bereshis b'shnayim, and you can't sit and talk about the nature, basically. Ma'aseh bereshis, creation, that can't be done b'shnayim, you and another person. The loy b'merkava, and not the ma'aseh hamerkava, which we're going to leave somewhat vague, but basically it's referencing the vision that Yechezkel had of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the chariot with animals on the wheels. I'm sure the Lubavitcher Rebbe has Guvaldic explanations for what exactly is the Ma'aseh Merkava, but for the rest of us, we're going to leave it at that and figure it out on your own. V'lo b'merkava b'yachid, one's not supposed to teach that on his own. Meaning, it sounds like one's not supposed to learn it on his own. Says the Mishnah, Ela im kain hoya chacham, unless he's wise, meaning he has a lot of knowledge. Umevin midaita, and not only does he have a lot of knowledge, there's plenty of people out there who have a lot of knowledge in their head, and they couldn't, they don't know how to, they don't have the subtlety for understanding one thing from another. They're just a collection of knowledge. That's one thing. Umevin midaita is a person who has the sensitivity of understanding the difference between things, knowing when one applies and when doesn't apply. Only such a person potentially could have the ability to learn these inyanim, because these inyanim are very, very dakistic. They're very, very subtle. And even though we are sitting at this virtual table together probably all don't really even know what it's referring to, but for those people who are learning these things, it's not just something you open up an English translated book by Aronson Publishing and say, oh, here's a book on the Ma'aseh Merkava. Let me figure out. This is not the way it works. This is something that a person needs to really have a Masorah in. Either way, so says the Mishnah, Kol hamistakel ba'arba'ah dvarim. Anyone who looks in 4 things or thinks about 4 things, these following 4 things, Rasui loy ki'ilu loy bala oil, better that he should live in this world. Meaning these are things we're really not supposed to think about. And I know we always say questions are good, and questions are good. There's really no question that's not worth a question. But if a person is going to make an effort in trying to understand the following 4 items, these 4 items are understood to be beyond human comprehension. And not only is it a waste of time, but it's going to ruin the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you think about the world, because it's going to make one feel dejected and depressed that since they can't understand it, it's going to make them feel very, very small. In fact, this is what we're going to discuss in a second. I actually know 1 or 2 people, really 2, who went down this road, have this chukka for like philosophy, and because they would start asking these very, very penetrating and difficult questions about ideas that we just can't have answers to, it made them, you go a little crazy. What is it referring to? Mala mala, mala mata, what's above and what's below, malifnim, what's inside, umala achar, what's outside or what's before and what's after. Many Rishonim have different formulations of what this means. Rashi's understanding is that it's spatial, it's geographical. It means what's above and what's below, maybe the Merkava. Malifnim umala achar, what is to the east and to the west, meaning beyond the limits of our knowledge, meaning it could be at his time, maybe he thought the earth was flat. It's hard to tell. Malafnim Malachar might mean what's at the end of the universe, right? That's one way to understand it. Others understand it. Tosos here understands it as a time factor. Malafnim Malachar means what happened, what was before Hashem created the world, what was after Hashem is going to end the world. Each have a different formulation, but the point is these are all ideas that are outside of human comprehension, says the Mishnah. Thinking about these things, better a person shouldn't be created. Meaning, these are not things we're supposed to occupy ourselves with. The kol shelichas al kavod kainai, and you can see the connection here. Thinking about those things in a certain sense, once you recognize that they're beyond human comprehension, is almost like a person's trying to think above God, and that's a disrespect to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So kol shelichas al kavod kainai, a person who doesn't have the respect of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, is rasei loy shalei ba'alam, better that he shouldn't come to this world. Meaning, the whole reason why we're here is to be makar Hakadosh Baruch Hu, come to love him and to fear him and to acknowledge him. Obviously, asking these types of questions that are attempting to try to get answers that inherently don't have answers is a disrespect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Mishnah, says the Gemara. It said in the Mishnah that you shouldn't teach a rayas to two people. You shouldn't teach about Ma'aser Bereishis to another person, and you shouldn't even learn Ma'aser Merkava on your own. Amris Bereishis v'loy b'merkava b'yachid, that he is not allowed to learn it on his own, and then it says afterwards, right afterwards, v'hadar amris ele imkein hayachachum me'evim midaita. Which one is it? Are you allowed to learn on your own about Ma'aser Merkava, or you're not allowed to learn on your own Ma'aser Merkava? Where it says Hachikamar, what it means is as follows. Don't read the Mishnah Bishlosha, Bishnayim, Biyachid. It means Lishlosha, Lishnayim, and Liyachid. So therefore, it doesn't mean a group of three. It means a group of four. Ein Darshan Be'arayas Lishlosha, right? Below B'Ma'aser Bereishis Lishnayim, meaning a group of three. Below B'Merkava Liyachid, a group of two, meaning you shouldn't teach it to another person. Meaning it's basically not something that's supposed to be taught to Chavrusa. Only if the person you're teaching it to is a chacham and he has the ability to understand things between each other. Meaning, what it's coming out over here is that arayas can be taught to, it can be taught to less than three people, but it can't be taught to three people. And Ma'aser Bereishis can't be taught to one person, but it can be taught, can't be taught to two people, but it can be taught to chavrusa to one person. And Ma'aser Merkava can only be taught to one person if that person is a chacham. You have a question?
What are we going to do when it comes to Yevamos?
So that's not what arayas means. But that's I'm assuming you're asking me about arayas.
Yeah.
Right. We'll see in the Gemara exactly what arayas means. Arayas means we'll see. It means sisrei arayas. It's something else. It's not what. And it's also possible that this entire halacha is, at least in arayas, is only predicated on the idea that when it's Perush Bal Peh and it's not written down. But if it's written down,
we better go. We better go. We're not going to be able to finish.
Okay, we're moving on. Says the Gemara, Ein darshan be'arayas b'shlosha. Said in the Mishnah that you shouldn't teach arayas in front of three. My taima, why is that? So the Gemara goes through a couple of possibilities. Ilema mishum dechsiv ish el kol she'er b'sara, and we understand it to mean ish is two, trey. She'er b'sara echad, that's three, and you see that you're not supposed to be megala erva, and we understand that as like sort of a derech drush over here, that it means it shouldn't be done in front of three. That can't be, because then when it says that a person shouldn't curse Hashem, or a person shouldn't do this avodah zarah of melech, are you going to understand hachanami that that's only true when it's with two or three people? That obviously isn't what it means there. So how can it mean it over here? The rabbi says, obviously, the second word of ish is coming to tell me that those two halachas of avodah zarah, the halachas of being Mekal Hashem applies to Goyim just like it applies to Yisrael, ish and ish. So Hainami, so too by Arayas, it means that it falls into the category that they're not supposed to do Arayas, just like they're not supposed to be Mekal Hashem, just like they're not supposed to do avodah zarah. So therefore, that can't be how we know not darshaning about Arayas in front of three. Must be that it says by Arayas that you shall watch over that things that needs watching. Ushmartim is trey, right? It's plural lashon. Mishmarti chad. You see, there's three, and it says don't do these terrible things of Arayas. So it must be that's what it means. Don't teach it in front of three from that pasuk. Elameyato, Mishmartem, that's the pshat. Tichsiv, Mishmartem es the Shabbos, Mishmartem es hamatzes, Mishmartem es Mishmer Shakodesh, Shabbos and Pesach and Kohanim. Hachanami, that over there, the halacha is only true if you have three people. I'm only chayav for eating chametz on Pesach if I do it with three people, not on my own. That can't mean. Elamai, Elamar Rashi, it can't be a drasha. It's got to be a svara. Elamai, ein darshan b'arayis b'shlosha. What does it mean? Ein darshan b'sisrei arayis. It means you can't teach the hidden rules of arayis. The Tosfos Rid has a different shot in Rashi. I like it a little bit easier to explain. He says what it means is you can't teach the kulas of arayis. There are a lot of kulas that exist in arayis. Although you're supposed to know the halacha, you're not supposed to teach that to three people. Why? My time, says the Gemara, svarahu. It's a svara. It's not from Sukkim. Betray, two people sitting together. Kiyasvi kami Rabbayu, when they're sitting in front of their Rebbe. Chad shakal v'tari b'hadi Rabba. One of them is going to talk to the Rebbe and ask him kashas. Ve'idich matzli udaina legamra. He's going to sit there and he's going to pay attention to the conversation. However, tlusa, if you have three people sitting by a Rebbe, Chad shakal v'tari b'hadi Rabba. One of them is going to go ahead and ask the Rebbe a kasha, and then you're going to have a hanach trei shakal v'tari b'hadi adadi. They're going to be sitting there kibitzing about something else. They're going to miss exactly what the conversation is. They're going to mix up the rules, and they're going to make a mistake thinking that the kula that he taught was really applying in one case and not in another case, and they're going to accidentally not know what the Rebbe is telling him. They're going to come out that they're going to handle a rayas incorrectly and end up being matter something that's usher. He says the Gemara, if that's the case, why are you limiting this halacha to only a rayas? If it's a question of miscommunication, many other areas have halacha too. Ihachi kol atar nami. Arayas shani, says the Gemara. No, arayas is unique. Why? Damar gezel the arayas nafshay machmadosan misavalam. These are very, very powerful taivas, stealing money and arayas, and therefore a person may not pay attention, and therefore the taiva is going to get the better of him, and he'll make justifications and rationalizations. Ihachi, says the Gemara, and why only arayas? Gezel nami. If you're saying that it's because of the tremendous taiva, the Gemara is no. Even still, between gezel and arayas is more strong. Why? Arayas is bein b'fanav, bein shaloi b'fanav, nafish yatzrei. A person's taiva for nashim is there even when he's not even thinking about it. It's standing there all the time. He doesn't need to be triggered to have the thought. Whereas gezel is b'fanav nafish yitzrei. It's only when a person has an opportunity to maybe take something, then the taiva is strong. But a person doesn't walk around thinking, unless you're a really big animal, you're not walking around thinking, oh, how can I go steal money from someone? Therefore, shaloi b'fanav is loy nafish yitzrei. So that's the distinction. We'll hold over here 2 dots, and we'll pick up Mirza Hashem tomorrow. Rabbi, for now, I'm assuming I'm going to be giving the shit tomorrow. If I find that today I don't have enough time to prepare, I'll let you know, hopefully by around 1 o'clock. And
okay.
If that's the case,
okay, don't forget Tuesday.
You don't need preparation.
Don't forget Tuesday we have a bris. Tuesday we have a bris.
Okay,
So
okay.
Tuesday
We'll learn by Rabbi Blinder.
Yeah, we'll learn by
Tuesday we
the
have Rabbi
Rabbi,
Blinder.
Kevra, thanks so much. Have a
That's the
wonderful, wonderful day.
Five David's press.
No, it's gonna be here.
Chaim David's bris will be here, so we have to learn there.
What time?
Yashikaya Rebbe.
What time?
Tomorrow morning? Oh.
Holiday.